Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Code and the Coding Coders Who Code It. I'm your host, Drew Bragg, and I'm joined today by the RailsConf World Champion, as proclaimed by Aaron Patterson, Aji Slater. Aji, for anyone who is not familiar with you, would you please do a brief introduction for the listeners?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. My name is Aji, and I am a former circus clown, current Rails and Ruby developer. I work with ThoughtBot as a development team lead. And yeah, happy to be here.
Awesome. So the way that this works is I'm going to ask Aji three questions. I'm going to ask, what are they working on? What kind of blockers do they have? If they don't have a current blocker, what's a recent blocker they had and how do they go about solving it? And then the last question, my favorite, what is something cool, new, or interesting that you've recently learned or discovered? It doesn't have to be coding related, but this is Code and the Coding Coders Who Code It, so it totally can be. So Aji, what are you working on?
Well, my current client project at ThoughtBot, because we're a consultancy, is working with a very old Rails code base. Been around for, I think, 12 to 13 years. And so it's got all of that comes along with that. And the front end is Angular, which I have never worked with before this client. And so that's been kind of an interesting journey to see how much I can possibly avoid working in the Angular code base, which is not very much because I kind of trend towards the front end in my personal proclivities. So that's been an experience.
I was going to ask if avoiding the Angular part was because of Angular or because it was the front end, which sometimes back end folks are like, I don't do that front endy stuff. So with it being like a 12, 13-year-old Rails app, that's Rails 4, 3?
Yeah, I don't know where it started. That feels about right. 3, maybe.
Have they kept up on their upgrades, or are you still working with a slightly older version of Rails?
A slightly older version of Angular, but the Rails is all up to date. So
nice. Okay. So you do lean towards the front end ish, or you enjoy, you don't shy away from it.
Right. I don't shy away from it. I started in school with graphic design and things like that. So visual art and that kind of layer has always been interesting to me. So yeah, I haven't shied away from it. And after going to a Ruby boot camp, we did our final project, my team, in JavaScript, having not really touched JavaScript all that much. So I feel like it's not my native language, but pretty close to it because I got into it pretty heavily at the beginning.
But you are kind of avoiding the front end because of Angular on this project.
Because of Angular.
I also have not had the pleasure of working with Angular. So what's driving you batty on the Angular front?
I think there's two different things in this particular code base. One is just sort of Angular takes a lot of different decisions and a lot of different approaches to solving problems than I'm either used to or would kind of choose to do myself. I feel like it probably suits really well people that have come from maybe .NET or Java, different things like this. There's a lot of kind of decisions and architectural quirks that feel vaguely like that, even though I haven't worked in either of those languages or frameworks either. So that's all supposition on my part. So there's that where how to solve a problem is just a completely different approach and style that I'm used to. And then the second is that this particular code base has a configuration or fleet of libraries that work together in a way that is very not the standard way that Angular is done. And so finding resources to know how these things work together on the internet is not super easy because it's kind of an uncommon stack in a way. And so it's been pretty challenging, not only having to reverse engineer a thought process that is pretty far away from mine, but also to have to navigate the differences between the resources that are available out there.
Interesting. So is this also kind of a situation where because it's not best practices, standard, common way of doing things, that AI isn't really helping to answer some of the questions? Or do you not generally use AI in work at ThoughtBot?
I think it's a little bit different for everybody, the level to which they use these kind of tools. I have been using Claude and a little bit of Copilot, I think pretty usefully. It hasn't been able to generate code in a way that it might for some other things, like, hey, give me this, I need this solution, give me a first draft of that. But it has been very good at explaining what is going on here. How do these things fit together? And I can at the very least get a more specific to the project answer than a documentation page would. So that's actually been pretty helpful. I kind of realized a month or two into this project that I was almost running an experiment of learning this framework through chatting with an LLM as opposed to doing the kind of foundational work with the framework, building up my understanding, and then working with it kind of approach that I would have before things like Claude and GPT.
Yeah. So how is that experiment going? Is it something that you're potentially going to keep using as you go forward, or maybe tweak it more?
I think tweaking it probably. There have been a lot of times when I've gotten caught in that LLM loop of, here's a solution. Oh, that didn't quite work. And 3 more steps later, it suggests the solution it did in the first place. And it's like, okay, well, we've gone nowhere. So I think there'll be a little bit of a hybrid of more of that kind of upfront learning on my part so that I will know better when we're kind of going astray a little bit.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. I don't really have to do that kind of, hey, help me understand this bit of code because I'm working in the same code base. But yeah, the AI does seem like it would be fairly useful for understanding code you're seeing for the first time, with the caveat of, because it can hallucinate so badly at times, knowing when to call its bluff is probably a really good bit of knowledge to have.
Do you find that you do use that pretty often in your work, though?
I've had mixed results with AI. I don't know if it's my poor breaking a problem down small enough for the LLM to understand and give me good feedback, or if they're just not there. It's interesting that you brought it up, because we were having this conversation at Podia the other day at our weekly dev team meeting, and we were talking about AI. The topic essentially was, what do we want AI to do for us and what don't we want it to do for us? And I actually don't want AI to write code for me. I like writing code. I like solving problems. I like the whole process of it, from the creative bits to some of the frustrating bits. It's enjoyable. It's part of the reason why I love my job. So I don't want AI to take that. I just want it to kind of be a slightly more responsive rubber duck when I'm working through something. And I don't think that that's actually how a lot of people feel. I feel like, especially with like how much you hear people talk about vibe coding and stuff, like people do want to just be able to say, build me X, and it gives you the code to do whatever you wanted it to do. And I don't want that. So I'm wondering if maybe the problem is that it's not designed to do the kind of thing I want it to do, or I'm just bad at prompting.
Have you seen Drew Bragg's famous red jacket he wears on stage at conferences? Did you know that jacket was dyed with the blood of Node.js developers? Okay, that's not true. But you know what is? JudoScale is the only autoscaler that consistently prevents request timeouts and backed up job queues. It's a better autoscaler because it tracks better metrics, analyzes them more frequently, and is run by a small team of committed devs. JudoScale works with Heroku, Render, Fly, and AWS. Visit judoscale.com to bulletproof your production environment.
Yeah, I think that really hits on the way that I kind of feel about it. I was using Claude Code for the first time to just be completely removed from the code and just tell it what I wanted to have happen, right? I hadn't gone that far into it until picking up that particular tool, and it sort of crystallized my feelings. I had this kind of ick feeling about all of the like LLM assisted coding and everything, and I couldn't tell why. Like, am I just a Luddite? Do I just fear change at this point? Anything like that. And I realized as I was doing it, it was working fairly well, I think. I just don't like it. Yeah, I enjoy coding the way that I code. I, like you were saying, enjoy problem solving. This is a fun and satisfying work for me. And if it's going to completely go in that direction, which probably won't, if I can't find the joy in that approach, then I just don't want to do this anymore. So like, we'll see how it goes. I'm sure there's another way to get that same kind of enjoyment if the industry or whatever our jobs end up being that, but I haven't found it yet. So
yeah, I think at minimum, we're definitely a few years away from our jobs being really at risk. Some of the funny but horrific stories of people shipping like really insecure code or not being able to, yeah, it's amazing what AI can do. It is truly incredible, but it's also not as coming for your job as some people would have you think yet. Hopefully that's so far in the future we don't have to worry about it, but definitely not yet. So the one thing that you're not working on, but I do feel like we sort of have to talk about since Aaron Patterson crowned you as the RailsConf World Champion after your amazing keynote, is your amazing keynote. So for anybody listening who doesn't know, because I haven't shut up about it, I was on the programming committee for this last RailsConf. And when we were going through the submissions, the CFPs, Aji's came up as a regular talk, but still entitled The Keynote of Keynotes. And it wasn't because of the title, it was because of the content that we all kind of went, oh, this needs to be a keynote. I know that you talked a little bit about it on the Bike Shed with Joel Quinville. You said it jokingly. Yeah, I just tried to use the word keynote as many times to get, but really in your head, were you thinking maybe they'll bump this into a keynote?
I was hoping for that, especially because the scope of the thing was to watch all of the keynotes and try and give a little takeaway from every RailsConf keynote ever. I was thinking, I can't do that in half an hour. That's not going to work.
It was an easy pick for us to say this should become a keynote. But what doesn't sound like it was very easy was the talk, creating it, watching every keynote from every RailsConf for the past 20 years, multiple keynotes, because we didn't always have the hack day as the middle day. So you'd have 2 additional keynotes. There's so many aspects of that sound challenging and interesting. But the one that my brain won't let go of is like, for recent RailsConfs, it's pretty easy to find the videos. Confreaks does an amazing job. But for older ones, I imagine that took some detective work. What was that like, finding the older, maybe before Confreaks or just older videos?
It was actually even a little bit more difficult than I kind of expected. I looked on YouTube to see where the gaps might be before writing up the proposal. And then once I knew that I had to dig in and do this, I started digging around. There was a lot of the Wayback Machine and Internet Archive going on old railsconf.org schedules and different things like this, because railsconf.org just gets written over every conference. So like it doesn't even exist. There's no archive page even on railsconf.org. So it was very much that idea of nobody in 2008 thought anyone in 2025 was going to care what they were talking about. So just nobody recorded even who was there a lot of the time without doing a little detective work. But yeah, those videos, they basically don't exist. I think there were 16 that there just is no video. I reached out to the speakers, to people involved in early RailsConfs, all of these sort of things. Nobody just kept those around. They might not even have been recorded at all. There were 1 or 2 years that, because O'Reilly used to be involved with RailsConf. And so for a little while there, some were on O'Reilly's servers and their sites. Those are all gone now, and nobody kind of grabbed them before they were gone. So for those missing keynotes, my material came from blog posts of people who were there and kind of like writing their thoughts and their takeaways. And luckily there was enough in the community that wanted to talk about their experiences at RailsConf that I could reconstruct enough of the sort of main ideas. A few of the speakers remembered enough, and they sent bullet points of what they remembered they wanted their key points to come away with, but nobody even had their slides still. It was all just kind of gone.
Especially nowadays, you just think if you give a conference talk, it goes up on YouTube and that's it. It's there forever. At the time, I doubt anybody was thinking that, obviously, because you couldn't find it. But once you did have almost all of the videos, was it just a chronological watching of like, here's the opening keynote from the oldest one, the closing keynote from the oldest one? Or did you have like, I want to do like Aaron's given, what did you say, 16?
15 keynotes, 16.
Okay. Did you watch all Aaron Patterson at once, or did you go chronologically? I guess is the question I'm trying to ask.
I thought about that for a while before starting to watch them. Did I want to go chronologically? Did I want to find themes? Did I want to go with like all through one person and kind of see their arc more back to back? But I think, as is my opinion with rewatching an old TV show or series of movies or something, release order is the proper order to watch them in, because they are going to be in conversation with each other in a way that you're not going to get if you watch in timeline chronologically with the MCU or, something like that. So I wanted to kind of reconstruct the context of the conversations going on at those conferences and at the time by watching them as close to in order as I could get, as far as like within one conference. But yeah, it was really interesting to see sometimes when there was an idea that you could tell caught on from one keynote and then got mentioned and talked about in the next one, and seeing where people definitely rewrote that little section because they wanted to respond to something someone had said a day or two before and things like that. So I went with chronologically, and I think it was the right choice after I had gone through a few years worth. And
you've also seen a lot of keynotes yourself because you've been in the community a while, right? When was your first RailsConf?
2016,
okay.
Kansas City.
So of the keynotes that you watched prior to that year, do you have a favorite or one that sticks out to you?
It's tough because like a favorite ice cream or favorite movie or something, depending on like how I'm feeling or what I'm thinking about, that answer changes. But I think one that had me thinking about it the most since I've watched it was Gary Vanderberg's, I think it's 2011 talk that, as far as I'm concerned, settled the question of are developers engineers or not, which I know is not as hotly debated a topic anymore, but it was for a few years after I started my career in 2015. And it's shocking because as far as I'm concerned, it was settled in 2011 because that talk was just really brilliant. It broke down the comparison between more quote unquote traditional engineering roles like civil engineering and chemical engineering and things like that, and why those are seen as engineering and what is similar to our work, and also how is the mindset of engineering carried forward into development and actually set us back a lot, and like what needs to be broken down, and kind of took another 40, 50 years with XP and all of these other things to really break apart the kind of using the wrong metaphor of engineering. And yet at the end, I still think it probably decided that, yeah, we're engineers. Engineers is a bigger concept than maybe we're stuffing it into.
Interesting. Would you consider that a technical talk? Obviously, it's a keynote. So when I say talk, I'm referring to keynotes just as a blanket. But when you think of a technical versus a non-technical talk, would that be considered to you a technical talk?
It's borderline. When you first were asking that question, I thought like, oh, yeah, absolutely. But then I thought, it's more about meta about the work, but it's not completely removed in that it's like human first and then gets into the work. It's like process first and then it gets into the work. So Yes, but there wasn't any code on screen, that kind of thing. The thing that I kind of think about technical talks is that as soon as whatever they're talking about is out of date, then that talk is kind of out of date for a certain amount. And that's sort of the thing that is the maybe defining quality or nebulously the kind of energy of like, well, this is a technical talk versus a non-technical talk. Is it going to stay with us and be higher concept or kind of broader? Or is it about a technical idea?
Armed with that description of technical versus non-technical from your now very complete experience, probably the most complete of anybody in the community, are keynotes mostly technical or non-technical?
Yeah, I think they're mostly non-technical because people try to hit a broader idea for better or for worse. Sometimes I think that's detrimental because people try to speak too broadly and don't really say very much at all. But certainly at the beginning of RailsConf, there was tradition of kind of introducing the newest parts of Rails and like what are the kind of technical concepts that are driving forward this last year and maybe the next year coming up of Rails development that we kind of moved away from as I think a little bit the framework got more stable. There wasn't as many groundbreaking things to talk about each year. And then we also expanded the horizons of who we had come to speak with us. There were people that weren't just Rails developers. There were people that weren't developers at all. And we learned what we could from other disciplines and other points of view. And those just kind of by their very nature had to be less technical because even if they were technical people, their technical content was not going to be related to Rails.
So predominantly non-technical because of the nature of keynotes. Is there a trend in keynoting similar to that where we've gotten away from the, hey, this is what's new in Rails technical keynote, and we've brought in more people who might not be talking directly about Rails? Is there any trend similar to that you've seen in keynotes that you hope keeps going at RubyConf or any conference that does utilize keynotes, that you hope they take that away of like, hey, it took RailsConf a while to get there, but I really like this style, maybe?
I am maybe a little constrained in my knowledge of conferences in general because the majority of conferences I've attended have been Ruby Central conferences. And so they have shared a similar arc in kind of their learnings and the way that they present topics. So I'm not as aware of non-Ruby or Rails conferences, what they sort of look like. But as far as RubyConf or what would I hope to see when I do go to a conference that's not a Ruby or Rails focused one, is I would hope that there is that continuation or that same idea of using the keynote as horizons broadening opportunity, getting someone that isn't part of the whatever community or maybe isn't going to talk about something very specific and kind of that energy of the keynote. It's a little bit of a catch-22 in that you don't want to set out to say something lofty. Otherwise, you're probably just going to lose the thread and wander all over and not really have a coherent presentation. But at the same time, wanting it to not be so in the weeds, really. Because that feels like the quality that a normal session would have, right? Like you're there to get in the weeds about something that maybe like a blog post is not the right way to release this information or to talk about this thing. And the keynote isn't going to land with as many people if it's really specific so that maybe a third of the conference would want to go see that session, right? You want to do something that's going to be more applicable to the wider group. Yeah, so I think kind of following that trend of like having a broader or more wide-reaching topic, but still a specific topic, rather than just come in here and do a end-all be-all TED Talk style thing. That trips people up, makes them kind of lose touch of why they might have been invited or elevated or whatever to give a keynote talk, because it's probably because you're already saying or thinking about something interesting that more people are going to want to hear about.
When you're at breaks in production, you want to quickly understand and fix it, not sift through logs for the next hour. That's where Honeybadger comes in. Honeybadger notifies you of errors, outages, and performance issues as they occur and helps you respond instantly when your systems go down. When you need to dig deeper, Honeybadger's advanced query engine helps you reach into your logs and grab just the information you need. With error tracking, performance and uptime monitoring, log management, and support for over 10 languages, Honeybadger is the best tool to gain real insight into your application's health and performance. Best of all, it's free to get started, and setup takes less than 5 minutes. Be sure to check out honeybadger.io. That's www.honeybadger.io. And thank you to Honeybadger for their continued support of the show. So you kind of mentioned it in that segment, and I know you talked a bit about it on the Bike Shed. I keep referencing that episode, so sorry, listeners, if you haven't listened to it yet, just hit pause, go listen to that episode, come back. We might cover some of the same stuff, but you talk a little bit, or a fair amount, about not trying to make the keynote this impactful thing, like not setting out to be like, I'm going to say this really powerful thing in my keynote because I have this fancy stage and this fancy slot. Because if you do that, you may end up not saying anything important, etc. How did you manage that own thought that I need this keynote to be good? I want to say something meaningful, not just talk about every keynote that's ever happened, but also I can't set out to blow everyone's minds because of every point you already made. How did you manage that?
It was a theme that I had to keep front of mind every time that I started to, outside of the content, come up with an idea of something I wanted to say. So from my own thoughts or like from my own experience, or again, thinking about the opportunity of having that moment on stage, I had to specifically tell myself, it's like, no, that didn't come from the project. It didn't come from the content. So put that aside. If it ends up being useful because it comes out of the content, I can pick it up again. But I really had to concentrate on like, what is the story coming out of the group of these talks? What are the themes? Are there things that, trying to notice things that people were bringing up again and again across the years, and trying to find the ways that I was affected or the things that I was thinking about because of watching the keynotes, rather than sort of a meta thing or something that I was bringing from outside. And eventually I got to the point where it's like, okay, I've been purposefully not thinking about anything. What is the point of my talk? And I started to think about that until I had watched Yehuda Katz's 2014 keynote, where he said something about Rails and convention over configuration being kind of this culmination of shared solutions that can make us all stronger together and make us all more powerful together than if we were working alone, and kind of refuting some detractors that were saying that shared solutions are just leaky abstractions. And he said that we needed to focus on the things that bring us together instead of focusing on the things that drive us apart. And when he said that, I paused it. I went back. I watched that line a couple of times. I made sure that I had it down verbatim, because all of a sudden it had kind of crystallized this idea of Ruby on Rails for me, of RailsConf, of what so many people had been and then would later talk about in this kind of chronological escapade of keynotes that kept coming up, that people would be saying something about a technical topic, but it would be about these shared solutions. It would be about coming together. It would be about working stronger together, and all of these different things that were both in technical content and in non-technical content. And it just seemed like that was the theme. That was the history, the point of Rails and RailsConf. And it just really struck me at that moment. I was like, well, there you go. That's the through line. That's what I am going to kind of put my own opinion to at the end of it. What was the point of all this? It's to rediscover this idea that was just sort of latent and I felt was already there, but I just never had words or never had a thought to elevate like that. And so, yeah, it was that 2014 talk that just struck me. And I knew that's where it was going to be.
That's such an interesting challenge to be able to go into watching all of these keynotes and try to not inject your own thoughts or feelings into them and just take them as they are so that you can present them to others who also weren't there without bringing your own, here are my thoughts on this person's keynote. It was not the goal. The goal was this person talked about this and these impactful things, but still make it your keynote.
Yeah, it was concerted effort. And it was also at some level, I knew going to be impossible, because just by choosing what I thought their takeaway was, I was imposing my own editorial voice on it. Right. And the only way to not do that would be to just hit play and watch all the keynotes together. So it was a little bit of like, I'm going to do the best I can while knowing that it's completely impossible to do 100%. So yeah.
But the effort is there, which is not always the case if someone's trying to tell you even facts without injecting their own opinion. The effort is appreciated. I want to talk so much more about this keynote because it was, full disclosure, Aji spoiled the ending for me, asking for some practice, and I knew it was coming, and it still got me. I think it got most people. And you got a very well-deserved standing ovation afterwards. And if anybody listening to this has not seen, the videos are now out, you need to see the keynote. It is a lot of work and it is a ton of effort, as you just explained, but should be clear to anybody, and especially after watching it. Oh, knowing the amount of work it took, knowing some of the work it took that you weren't expecting, knowing everything, would you do it again, all over again, from scratch?
There were definitely times while I was working on it that I was like, why did I do this to myself? This is awful. My talk writing technique is unsustainable in the first place, the way that it just sort of takes over my life. But this was another 94 hours of watching video on top of needing to come up with an hour's worth of material. It was a lot, but I love how it came out. I love how it landed with people. I love the way that people have connected with me since then. The sense of being pulled further into the community that I had that day after giving that talk was just incredible. I was saying the other day that I had a different kind of anxiety before giving the talk. It wasn't the usual, like, are people going to like it? Am I going to mess up? That kind of presenting something live anxiety. It was more an excitement. I came down to the conference area from my hotel room and I was thinking that I know it's good. I just can't wait to share it with people. And it was a different kind of excitement and nervousness than I had ever had before. So yeah, I would absolutely do it. I think I have been maybe a little annoying in conversations over the last few months, being like, there was a keynote where they said, I'll take that too. I'll be that person again. And I will be that person for months, if not years still, I'm sure.
Well, you do have a very unique knowledge set now. And yeah, I mean, you earned it, right? That's a lot of hours of video watching. That's a lot of hours of collecting your thoughts. And you did all of the illustrations, right?
I did, yeah.
Yeah, there was a lot of really good illustrations in it too. So It is funny because for anybody who doesn't know, I did a keynote, not a RailsConf keynote. It was a RubyConf keynote, barely. And it was your partner's fault. It was Mina's fault. At least she was the one that talked me into doing it.
Oh, she fully takes credit for that, by the way.
Good. It's cool. So, because I keep saying it's Mina's fault. And my keynote, by your definition of a good keynote, was a terrible keynote. Like, there was no point to it. It was me going up on stage and like making the creator of this language I love laugh and just feeling good about doing that kind of nonsensical. That was a lot of work, I felt like. And then hearing a lot of work you put in, that is a different level. I don't know if I even have that capability to like put in that many hours into something and then put in that much time and effort into making. Very impressive. This is where Andrew Mason would tell me to shut up because I'm fanboying, but he would use more harsh language.
I think, first of all, you shouldn't sell your own keynote short. That playfulness and enjoying and fun is somehow not a worthy theme and cause, especially amongst Rubyists.
I think it's a great talk, or at least it's got to be, because people keep asking me to do it. It just felt weird to do it as a keynote. It felt really weird to do it in front of everybody. It wasn't a, hey, go to that talk or the game show or this other talk. It was, hey, if you're coming to the conference, you're going to sit here and watch this game show. Felt surreal.
I don't know how this will change your opinion of everything, but it was not the first Ruby game show to happen as a keynote at RubyConf.
No, I sort of found this out from trying to prepare myself for your talk, of like seeing what some of the keynotes were and what some of the topics you were going to cover are. And also a little bit of my own, like, hey, people have done game shows in the past. What did they do? How did this land? Stuff like that. So yeah, it just felt weird for me to be doing it, I guess.
This is a bit of a tangent, but it's kind of related there because I feel like you've talked about this in conjunction with that whole idea of you making fun of this language and the creator is sitting right there in front of you watching you do that. Is it true that you named your dog Mats?
Yes. Matsumoto is actually what we call him. We call him Mats for short. He's adorable. He wore a red tuxedo at our wedding because of course he did. And we had gotten a girl dog instead. It would have been Ruby. I absolutely love Ruby. For so many reasons, Ruby changed my life. To have the opportunity to name something I deeply care about after something else I deeply care about, that's what I was going to do.
I have kind of a similar experience that Amina and I's first dog together, we named Henson after Jim Henson, who is an incredible influence. And Jim Henson's work across the Muppets and everything else that he did and his philosophy on life has been so impactful to me. And so we named our little Muppet Henson, and much the same as you telling Mats that fact of you having named your dog after him, I was lucky enough once to run into Heather Henson at the Orlando Fringe, and she saw on the like poster for my show, she was like, "Oh, is that your dog?" Yeah. I was like, "Yeah, it is." And she said, "What's his name?" I was like, "Henson? He's named after your dad." And so, yeah, when you told that story about your pup and Matt's being in the audience, I know how that feels.
You did bring up something that I want to at least touch on. How do you go from circus performer, circus entertainer, circus clown to a Rubyist, to a developer or engineer, if you so choose?
So, yeah, I ran away to join the circus. I went to circus school in San Francisco.
There's a school? There's a circus school.
Yeah, it's the San Francisco School of Circus Arts, or the Circus Center, as it's known. They have a clown program called the Clown Conservatory that I did 2 years at. I got a degree in experimental theater with them. And yeah, now I work in tech. Yeah, I changed careers because it didn't work out in comedy for me for a myriad of reasons. One of which was the undiagnosed ADHD that I didn't really find out about until some pandemic induced self reflection that led me to spread my interests and things too thin to ever get to like a circus level of skill in a lot of different things. I tried to make that what I did, that I was a collector of useless skills. I even had still out there a vestigial YouTube channel where I tried to learn a useless skill every week for a year and like make a video about it. That was unsustainable as well. But it didn't really work out. Like it landed really well with people that it landed with, but not enough to like sustain a career. We left the Bay Area. Mina and I met on tour in the circus with Ringling Brothers, by the way. And then so we lived in San Francisco again after that. And we left because we couldn't afford it, because you can't live in the Bay Area unless you're in tech. And then you still kind of can't live in the Bay Area. We moved to Chicago, and the idea of just having to work the network from the ground up, it wasn't interesting. It wasn't going to be like satisfying or fulfilling. And so I started looking around and I found Dev Bootcamp. And I'd always been kind of tinkering more with my website and other performers' websites while being a performer. So I thought, hey, maybe this is something that I could do. And then I, found Ruby on Rails instead of just HTML and CSS. And it's like, oh, this is how the internet happens. And just kind of stuck.
That's amazing. It's so funny because I'm pretty sure you're the first person I've met that can be like, I was a circus clown and now I'm in tech. But at the same time, like your story is so familiar. So many people in this industry of like, I used to do this and then just took this fun little hobby or interest I had and turned it into this amazing career. It's interesting to hear that you toured with Ringling Brothers Circus, which is, I imagine, a big deal. I mean, it's a pretty well-known circus. I imagine they don't just take anybody. And then to hear you also say like there's an anxiety when you give a talk, when you get up on stage, like you still have an anxiety of being in front of people after you were a clown.
Well, it's not the same kind of anxiety that people have of public speaking. I can tell that it is different. It's a little bit more maybe about like, I want it to be received well and these different things. So there is definitely a cheat code or something that I can think like, as big as this audience gets, it's never going to be the 24,000 people at Boston's TD Garden that I performed for or something like that. So whenever people ask how to get better at speaking and they get to the point where it's like, okay, but I'm afraid of public speaking, I'm like, I wish I could help you, but it's not a shared experience. I can help you with all of the like technique parts of it. And please, if there's anybody that wants to get into speaking, reach out to me. I'm very happy to help. I'm just not going to be able to help with that part. A lot of it is just, you kind of just have to do it, but I'm not going to be able to like tap into the same kind of emotions in the same way that somebody else who has a similar experience will be able to kind of help and share those kind of trials and tribulations.
Dang, because I was hoping you were going to tell me, because I've done the game show more times than I can count with shoes on, I think, at this point. And I still get nervous every time I go up on stage, like it's the first time. And I was kind of hoping you'd be like, well, here's how you get over that. But I guess not.
The only thing that I think that has helped me when I've needed it, and I think has helped other folks, is to remember that everybody there wants you to succeed. Nobody is looking for you to fail. Like, they paid money to be there. They want this to be good. As much as it might feel like it at times, nobody is rooting for your failure. That's all I got there.
So the next question I would normally ask is, what kind of blockers do you have if you don't have a current blocker? What is a recent blocker you had? And it can be about the Angular project that you currently have. It can be about, you kind of touched on blocker-esque things with the keynote. But if there's like something specific where you're like, actually, yeah, I hung up on this thing. What's a blocker in the life of Aji?
To kind of keep going on the speaking train, it is the application keynote. Because, like I said, I went to school for art and I studied animation, and I have a lot of opinions about how things should look visually. And I want that to show up in my slides and presentations. And Keynote doesn't want to do all of the things I want to happen. And so the number of hoops that I have to jump through trying to make something look remotely the way that I want, or the hacks that I have to come up with to make this program bend to my will, is ridiculous. And just the sheer number of clicks to do something sometimes, and the fact that it's an Apple made application and the Apple scripting support is terrible. I could take away a couple of those clicks. I know how to program, even though that's barely a programming language. That is always my biggest blocker. And somehow I will put myself through the hell of all of those hoops because I am opinionated about how I want this thing to look. And I think it is worth it. And I have a lot of opinions about how animation can help people understand a concept. And so the more angles I can take to help someone understand a concept, I'm going to take them. And so I put in all of this extra work, but I really wish there was a better presentation software, because I've tried a bunch of the other ones and they are still not as powerful as Keynote, and Keynote is still incredibly limited. So I don't know what it is. I'm going to have to start using After Effects or Final Cut or something to make these presentations.
Go full-blown Hollywood movie style instead of slide. Just, we're going to hit play on this movie now.
That's my biggest blocker to getting one of these things done. That's my struggle. Keynote is my struggle.
Yeah, I keep telling myself I'm going to learn Keynote one day so that I stop with my crappy markdown converted slides. But I'm like, but they work. They do the job. And Keynote feels daunting. Take it from someone who's opened the application 3 times and been lost within 10 minutes. I know that in order to get the slides better, I'm going to need to learn it. My God, it seems so daunting. I would rather just deal with crappy slides.
Yeah, and I think for the majority of slides and talks and presentations, too much bells and whistles can really detract. There's a bell curve, inverted bell curve. There's a gulf in the middle where too much stuff is just going to make it worse. So it's either you need to keep it simple and stick to your message, or kill yourself animating 800 slides in a half-hour presentation or something.
No, I'll keep it simple. I appreciate you enabling me and my laziness with my slides. The last question is, what is something cool, new, or interesting that you want to share? Could be you built it, could be you read it, could be anything. The floor is yours.
I'm looking around my crazy workshop right now to try and figure out what things that I've been learning lately, because I do a lot of different hobbies and projects, and I'm always trying to learn something new. But I think right now my big project is I'm moving to Scotland at the beginning of November. And so a lot of what I've learned about is the kind of differences between the United States and the UK as far as logistical things, about language differences and all of these different things. But what I've kind of learned the most is that so much about living in the United Kingdom is about England. And I'm going to be moving to Scotland. And I know that those are 2 different countries with different cultures. And so I have learned that there is not as much to be learned about my coming up new home as I sort of expected there to be. With all of the information there is about living in the UK, it's so much about England. And I know that there is going to be a sort of cliff where that stops working. And so I've gotten to the point where I've learned what the unknowns are, which I think is an important step in learning anything, right? Because you can start learning and you're like, oh, I got this. But then you get to a point where you've actually learned enough where you know that you don't know anything yet. And I've gotten to that point. And that's a frustrating point, but it's also an exciting point, because that's where you actually kind of stretch and grow and you get the most out of it. And so I'm there and I'm ready to go into that next step, but it has to kind of wait until November, and then we'll see how it goes.
You could have used that as the blocker question. Like, what is your blocker? I can't find information about the place I'm moving to, which I like to camp and do a little dabble in backpacking. And like, I do a ton of research before I go anywhere. I can't imagine moving somewhere, like your life, moving, not visiting, moving and not being able to find information.
There's enough stuff about the things that you would need to know to make the move stick, like laws and all of that. I just think that there's going to be more culture shock than I sort of expect, because you'd think moving to a different country, well, they speak the same language. There's enough of kind of like root culture similarities. And I know a lot about the differences. I've been an Anglophile all of my life and all of these different things. But I just know watching these that it's like, yeah, that's not how I've felt in Scotland so far. So something's not matching up here. And yeah, just kind of learning that vague feeling that I can't put my hand on exactly why just yet, but I know that this isn't the whole picture. And it's exciting, it's daunting, it's all of the good things about taking on a new sort of challenge and a new journey.
Not that there's anything wrong with Scotland. I'm not asking the why, as in like, why in the world would you choose Scotland? It just means there's a lot of places that you could move in the world. What drew you to Scotland?
Edinburgh's just the most gorgeous city. So that's part of it for sure. Like I said, I've been an Anglophile my whole life. My paternal grandmother was born in England. And so just kind of an interest and closeness to United Kingdominess has been kind of near to my life in a lot of different ways. Grew up watching British sitcoms and that sort of thing. Mina, my wife, really needs elevation in scenery. And we don't really get that in Chicago, but you do get that in a little bit in Edinburgh and definitely in the Highlands. The landscape is just beautiful, the kind of closeness from the city to nature. A lot of like little reasons that kind of add up in aggregate. There's kind of feeling of closeness to like magic and myth a little bit, in that it feels like that's where the fairies live. And even though I've tried to explain to Mina that fairies are not actually very kind to humans, please do not go talk to the fairies. Bad things will happen. She's still very excited about meeting fairies. So
you know your fairy myth. Not many people know that
yeah.
Fairies are, for lack of a better term, they're dicks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, just like lots of little things. The kind of quality of homeness is the only way I can describe it that I felt living in San Francisco. I felt walking around in Edinburgh, and maybe it's a little bit, the sidewalks sometimes turn into stairs, is a quality in both of those places. The weather is a little bit the same. It's kind of like temperate, but a little coldish. A lot of little things that sort of add up to make it seem kind of like a dream or a fantasy. And it's like, yeah, but we're going to go make it real.
It's such a cool way of describing it. I'm not just moving, I'm going on this like semi-permanent adventure. That's awesome. Is there anything else that you want to talk about before we wrap this up?
I don't know if this is for the podcast or what, but you mentioned when you were talking at the podcast panel at RailsConf that there was an episode of Code and the Coding Coders That Code It that kind of stands out and means a lot to you, where you talked with your guest about ADHD and tech and that whole thing. And I would like the recommendation of which episode that was so that I can go back and listen to it.
Sure. So definitely episode 1. Pretty much any episode that I have Andrew Mason on, we talk a little bit about it in episode 1 because he's my first guest. He kind of hijacked my ADHD a little bit to make sure that the episodes happened. I said this at the podcast panel, but I was struggling to get that first episode recorded, and I was just texting with him, and we have very similar ADHDs. His is a little worse than mine, but very similar. He just knew like, okay, we'll just do it now. While we're talking about it, what's going on? But the episode that we did a lot of ADHD talking about is episode 18, which is from March 7th of 2023, which is crazy to say out loud. So We do a bunch of ADHD chatting in both of those episodes, but I think if I'm remembering correctly, 18 is the one where we had like a full segment on like working with our ADHDs and making sure not being afraid to, which was always something for me. Like I was very afraid to be like, well, I have ADHD, but like how important it is when you're working with others, especially in a world like this. I have ADHD can help other people just like understand our workflows, understand why it's 2 a.m. and we just ripped out like a ton of PRs and like, you didn't get anything done for the past 3 days. And now it's 2 a.m. on a Thursday. What's going on? Like stuff like that, where it can still be hard to talk about a little to a degree. But I think especially getting to interact with so many other devs and successful devs and very intelligent people that are like, yeah, I also have ADHD and here are the types of struggles I have. And I'm like, I have those too. This is not nearly as bad or as damning as like it was in my head when it was first revealed to me that I had it from my doctor. So good episodes to listen to. Good call out.
Yeah, it's that shared experience and everything that I'm looking for. So I'm looking forward to it.
Hopefully those episodes give it to you. And the next time you come on the show, we can talk about nothing but ADHD. Because I do think there's a lot that I wish I knew when I was first diagnosed, and especially when I first got into this industry after being diagnosed, which happened a few years before I got into this industry. So I'm always down to talk about it and give other people a resource, a place to like learn about themselves in a way. You just haven't figured this out yet. It took us a while too, but we'll tell you all about it. So anybody who wants to follow you or learn more about you on the internet, where can they find you?
Yeah, I'm mostly these days on Blue Sky, doodling.dev, I think, because I finally linked my domain to my account there. So you can find me there. And I'm going to say this out loud so that I have to do it. I'm going to start putting short, essentially like little talks on a YouTube channel. So if you want to hear what I'm thinking about as far as like Ruby and object-oriented code and stuff, it'll be on YouTube, Doodling Dev.
Awesome. And we'll put those in the show notes so everyone can easily find it. And what do they say on YouTube? Smash the like and subscribe button. Gotta use the right
lingo.
verb.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it doesn't work. And I just see Aaron Patterson in my head every time I say that out loud. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Aji, for talking about the keynote. For the keynote, again, listeners, if you've gotten this far and you haven't hit pause to go watch the video, as soon as this episode is over, go watch it. It's incredible. We'll definitely have you on again because this was a blast. Listeners, I will see you in the next one. Bye.